Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of the Dissenter. I'm your host, as always, Ricardo Lopes, and today I'm joined by Dr. Thaís Pansani. She is an associate researcher at the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History. Her main research questions are about human interaction with the Pleistocene megafauna in the Americas and the peopling of the Americas. So today we're going to talk about humans' arrival in the Americas and megafauna there and its extinction. Those are the two main topics we're going to cover. So, Dr. Pansani, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to everyone.
Hello, welcome. Thank you for asking me to join this interview and for the opportunity to talk a little bit about these topics that I think is fascinating. So, really happy to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
No, it's really fascinating, and I've already talked a little bit with some other anthropologists on the show about the peopling of the Americas, so I would really like to get some more details today. But let's start with perhaps a timeline here. So, do we know when exactly Homo sapiens arrived in the Americas?
We know what is for sure the timing that humans were in the Americas. So we know that for sure humans got to the Americas around 15,000 years ago. That is what is settled in archaeology, anthropology, paleontology. But it's still a huge discussion because we have several researchers, including myself, who work with earlier archaeological sites and claim for evidence that humans were in the Americas around at least 20 or even before 20,000 years ago, which is the time for the last ice age. So we call the last glacial maximum. So during 26 to 19,000 years ago, we have our last ice age. So this timing, like from before 19,000 years ago, is kind of complicated. Some researchers think that how we would be able to cross Siberia into the Americas. So it's still like a lot of discussion regarding earlier dates. So we know for sure that around 15,000 years ago, humans got here, but we have evidence for maybe earlier.
Mm-hmm. And how long did it took for humans to populate the entire continent, or the two continents, if we consider North America and South America, two different continents? How long did it take for us to arrive in North America and then to go all the way down to the tip of South America?
That is also a great question that we're still investigating and we're still discussing. So we have a very solid archaeological site and evidence in Chile, here in South America, that dates to at least 14,000 years ago, maybe 15,000 years ago. So we know that humans were in South America at least 15,000 years ago. Maybe earlier than 18,000 years ago, there's another layer in this same archaeological site called Monte Verde that researchers are still a little skeptical, and so maybe another layer that shows evidence for earlier than 18,000 years ago. But we have solid evidence that most archaeologists today accept that humans were in Chile and Monte Verde at least 15,000 years ago. But we, like I said, maybe we were here earlier, so we still don't know, and we still don't know the roots. We don't know how they got to the Americas, if it was in the Pacific coast or the Atlantic coast or inland or several routes. So all of that is still debated.
Yeah, I understand there's lots of uncertainty here, but I mean, if we were already in South America by 15, 14,000 years ago, then if what you mentioned earlier about we getting to the Americas, to North America specifically 15,000 years ago, then it was over just the course of like around 1,000 years that we went from North America down to South America. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, some researchers say that this was the starting point. So humans got to the Americas around 15,000 years ago. So in this perspective, yeah, that would be like a very fast human migration through all the Americas, which is another evidence, I think, for like, yeah, maybe humans got to North America way earlier. So we have the time for all this migration to South America.
Yeah. And so just to go a little bit back for a second, so what is the best understanding we have right now about the way we got to the Americas? I mean, from, let's say, northeastern Asia to America, how did we get there?
So for a long time, we thought about the inland route. That is when humans, after the last ice age, because during the ice age, everything was covered, especially North America, like almost all Canada and great part of the continental United States were covered with ice sheets. So the ice age made almost impossible for humans to walk. It was like blocking the North America land portion. So after the deglaciation of these ice sheets, and when the climate was better and favorable for human migrations, we thought that humans from Asia, from Northeast Asia, they walk inland to the North America, from Siberia and then North America, and then south, the continent. So this is one main route, especially for a long time, it was supposed to be the only route. But then when we start to see all these different and earlier archaeological sites than the Clovis culture that was for a long time also considered the major evidence for the first Americans, especially in Chile, which is also in the Pacific coast. We start to think about other possibilities, other routes. And after Chile, researchers, especially in the US, start to find other archaeological sites in the Pacific coast of the US. So Oregon, California. So they came to the conclusion, the hypothesis of a new theory, which was that humans walk from the Pacific coast. So they were walking, even if the inland was covered with ice, it doesn't matter because we have the beach, like we have the Pacific coast. So we walk and we have the sea, we can fish, we can sometimes go a little bit into the forest and hunt, but we have like this whole rich ecosystem in the Pacific coast. So we just walk through also the same origin that is like Northeast Asia, and then we walk through the Pacific coast. So this is the second main route. But like I say, I think I'm gonna be like the whole interview saying like, we still don't know, we're still talking, we're still discussing. So so far we have like these two main routes. We don't know if maybe it happens first through the Pacific and then another migration wave happened in inland, or maybe happen simultaneously. So we're still discussing the timings for that. And even now, we have another possibility that it was maybe the same coast migration, but in the Atlantic. So we have the continent, so we can go to the Pacific Ocean, and we have the Atlantic Ocean. So maybe humans also was on the border of the continent and was moving through the Atlantic coast, which makes sense also when you think about really early archaeological sites in Brazil, that is in Northeast Brazil, that is really close to the Atlantic Ocean. And we have researchers working there claiming for evidence for humans around 20, maybe 30,000 years ago.
Mhm. Or perhaps if we're still not sure about the routes that humans took back then, maybe there could have been population splits and two different populations could have gone through the two different coasts, right? The Pacific coast and the Atlantic coast. That could have happened as well, I imagine.
Exactly. And we have a genetic evidence about Native Americans that shows that the current Native Americans, they are descendant from Asian population. So we know for sure that our Native Americans have this ancestry to with the Siberian and the North Asian populations, but maybe they also come from like this more recent migration wave. Maybe we have other migration waves from other routes that maybe Pacific or Atlantic coast that didn't succeed. It's hard to say didn't succeed because they succeed for a specific time, but they didn't pass their genes, and that's why we don't find that in the genetic history yet. But even the genetics are genetics is improving recently. So we are being able to find DNA and sediments in other things, not just bones, but sediments rather than just skeletons, human skeletons. So we are finding new interesting stuffs, and I think that we have potential to find more stuff about that.
Mhm. So before we change topics, let me just ask you this just to make sure of this point. So we Homo sapiens were the first and the only hominin species to get to the Americas, right? I mean, it was not that some other species prior to us, like, I don't know, Homo erectus or a descendant of Homo erectus got to the Americas, right?
I love that I'm gonna say the same thing again. I'm kidding.
Okay.
For sure. No, for sure. For sure. Like the solid evidence is that Homo sapiens was the first and so far the only one to species to reach the Americas. But as science is crazy and beautiful, we have evidence in California, archaeological site in California, that those authors who wrote that paper uh, talk and claim that some human, and they don't know, they don't say, oh, definitely Homo sapiens, and then is this a specific topic and discussion about, oh, maybe another species, maybe another human. So they claim evidence in California in this archaeological site that is called I forgot the name of the site right now. It just fade away. Cerucci, I think. If I remember, I'll remember here.
No problem.
So yeah, so like in this mastodon, probably related site, they found evidence for fractures of mastodons. So they think that it's human intentional breakage of these bonds. So, but this site dates to 130,000 years ago. So it's like way earlier. Most archaeologists do not accept this evidence. They think it's natural breakage. But the authors think that, yeah, humans broke those bonds and not necessarily Homo sapiens. So we do have like some or other little bit of discussions regarding that. So I just wanted to introduce this here, even that is not widely accepted in archaeology, in American archaeology, but just to give an idea of how science is dynamic, and we need to discuss, like they publish in Nature, one of the biggest scientific journals. So the evidence was published. Those authors are important archaeologists, like institutionalized authors, researchers. So they give this contribution to science, and then we need to evaluate and discuss. So I just wanted to give this brief overview about how this discussion goes in terms of Homo sapiens was the only one in the Americas. But yes, after saying that and giving like this little introduction to one major discussion, and I think that is the only discussion that people still talk about, the possibility of another Homo sapiens in the Americas. We know that just the Homo sapiens got to the Americas, especially because the Americas were the last continents to be populated, for sure, also. So in human evolution, we know that the Americas were the last continent.
Mm-hmm. Great. So, yeah, and we have to keep in mind, I guess, always in these discussions, particularly surrounding paleoanthropology and archaeology, that we're always working with an incomplete picture of the past, right? I mean, it's by gathering new sources of evidence and finding new archaeological sites and so on that we little by little try to complete the picture. But of course, I'm not trying to imply here that, yeah, there must have been some other hominin species in the Americas before us, but I'm just saying that we have to always keep that in mind. Right?
Exactly, because what if we're going to dismiss this evidence if we find like solid evidence just because it wasn't supposed to be so? Maybe if we have solid evidence, I think that is one of our jobs as scientists, to evaluate each other's claims and each other's studies. So instead of just disregard and just say, oh, this is not possible. Okay, so let me see what you're proposing and why you're saying that as something that it seems crazy right now, but it might be. It's natural science. We are always trying to go deeper into natural science and find out something that is new and exciting.
Mm-hmm. Do we have a good idea about the kinds of environments that humans, Homo sapiens, found in the Americas when they arrived there? I mean, and was it something, of course, if they survived, at least to some extent, they must have been able to adapt to them, but was it something that they were particularly well adapted to when they arrived there? I mean, what do we know about that?
I think that this came also to the same discussion of when that happened, because depending on when do you think and do you agree, do you accept the evidence for humans got in here, the environment is going to be different, right? So if you think that humans got here around 14,000 years ago, it's already after like the glaciation, so the climate was totally different than the ice age. So I think that discussing that would depend on the time frame that you accept the evidence for humans got in the Americas. But if you think about humans migrating from Siberia to North America, so from being there in the Bering Strait, in the Siberian area, and the north of North America, around at least 30,000 years ago, which I think that is the most likely scenario, at least 30,000 years ago. I think that you will find a cold environment that the humans were already adapted, because it's similar, to where they come from Siberia. And then when they reach North America, they found similar vegetation, especially like tundras and big animals, like a more open, cold environment. But then, of course, if they reach to South America, we don't have ice sheets anymore. It was probably colder than it is now, but it's not the ice age configuration in South America that we see in the Ice Age movie, for example, that is very like North American scenario. So I think that they were very adaptable groups of people, because we are smart. Humans are very, very smart. And the Americas is not only huge, but we have so much diversity. So we think a lot, and I know that we're going to talk a little bit more about megafauna here. So we think a lot about the Pleistocene and the Quaternary megafauna, but there's others. There's like other animals, there's birds, there's fish, there's this huge ecosystem, this huge availability of resources and vegetation and fruits. So I think that they were very adaptable from their environment in Siberia and North America. So like really similar. And then when they were reaching south, they start to find new configurations, and even going to inland. So the archaeological site that I work in is in central Brazil, is like in center of South America, and it was definitely not an ice age environment, but it was perfect for humans be there, because we have, even in the Pleistocene, we had so much diversity of fruits, of vegetation, of small mammals, of giant mammals. So I think that when humans start to find these new configurations, new biomes, they're easily to adapt, because it's all in the Americas. I think they are all easily adaptive biomes and environments.
By the way, let me perhaps introduce now this question, which I think will not only apply, it is sort of a broader question that will not only apply to our migration to the Americas, but perhaps even to Homo sapiens migrations in general. So, do we know why Homo sapiens migrated to the Americas? I mean, why is it that migrations occur? Are there specific pressures, environmental pressures, or something like that, that lead people to migrate from one continent to the other?
That is a great question. I never stopped to think, or I think I never read about that. I think that would be a great question to talk with Brianna if you invite her again and she has the opportunity to come here. She's going to be able to talk a lot more than me about human evolution in general, because I'm more a paleontologist and not an anthropologist or archaeologist. So I don't work with human evolution. Indeed, I work more with the paleontology and paleoecology, and now a little bit with zooarchaeology and regarding the peopling of the Americas. So I read a lot about the peopling of the Americas, but I don't know how to answer that. That is a great question. I think, with my understanding, that there's like several reasons for human migrating, especially following animals, like we're following resources, like we're getting hungry, there's nothing here, we know that these animals are going that way, let's go that way. So I think that in evolution as a kind of setting scenario, it's a lot about the ecological pressures, like environment is bad here, it's getting cold, let's go that way. So I think that we follow the environmental conditions, but definitely that would be a question, I think, for like a paleoanthropologist working with human evolution. They would give like a really better response than I'm doing here.
No, fair enough. That's totally fair. I mean, I was just wondering because we have to keep in mind that back then, of course, nowadays, if, for example, we migrate to a new country, we can gather lots of information about that place before we go there. But back then, I mean, there was no one in the Americas, no one in Northeastern Asia. So, I mean, it was always a huge risk, I would imagine, for people to migrate to a completely new place, right? So there must have been very good reasons, evolutionarily speaking, for people to do that. I imagine, of course.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It's a great question, and I'm certain that there's like a huge discussion, and also some researchers might think, oh, it's just because human pressures, environment, and then other researchers might have like other perspectives, but it's definitely interesting to think about that.
Yeah, I will try to keep that in mind and ask other paleoanthropologists, and I have them on the show, particularly ones who work on the Americas. So let's get into megafauna now. So first of all, what is megafauna? What is it that we call megafauna? What kinds of animals are classified as such?
Okay, so we call megafauna all the mega animals, so all animals that are large or even giants in size. And that could be from the land, like land animals, or marine. So we can have like huge animals in both water and land. But it's very common to associate megafauna with this specific group that is land mammals. But not only mammals, we have like some giant birds, even like in the Quaternary and the Pleistocene of South America, for example, we have like what we call the, how is it in English? But it's like this bird, ave do terror in Portuguese. I don't remember exactly. Anger bird. I forgot the name in English. So like this huge bird that we have here in South America. So it's not only mammals and it's not just land mammals, but we commonly talk about megafauna for like these large land mammals that lived, especially in the Pleistocene, because the Pleistocene was the last epoch in the geological time frame that these animals lived. So during the transition of the Pleistocene to the Holocene, which is the geological time that we are living now, we have the extinction of most of these land mammals worldwide. So in Australia, in Eurasia, in Asia, in the Americas, but not like with different proportions in the different continents. So because of that, because when we talk about mega mammals and how there's a specific group of mega mammals that live into around 10,000 years ago, they disappeared around 10,000 years ago, we commonly associate megafauna to this group of animals. I hope that it makes sense. Let me know if there's anything that was not clear with that.
No, it definitely was. But perhaps paint us a broader picture of some of the main, perhaps, mega mammals that we could find back to, 15,000, 14,000 years ago when we arrived in the Americas. I mean, what kinds of animals could we find back then?
In the Americas only. So in the Americas, we had the mammoths, the mastodons, so all the proboscideans, right, that are extinct because now we just have like the elephants, but we used to have mammoths, mastodons in North America, and some species of horses, because now the only horses that we have in the Americas are the ones that Europeans brought to the Americas, domesticated and brought to the Americas. But before that, we used to have species of horses that were natural from these continents, that they were extinct. We used to have paleollamas. We used to have, especially in South America now, giant armadillos, giant sloths, giant ground sloths. These two specific animals that there's nothing related. So this is like really interesting about megafauna because some groups disappeared and we don't have anything related to think about. So when we think about giant armadillos, we know the little armadillos that we have now, but we have some species like toxodons that were like similar to a hippo, but it's not, like very different, strange animals. So we have macrocanias, we have very interesting group of animals that disappear and we don't have anything similar today. So these are, and of course, like the carnivores. I was just talking about the herbivores because it's the ones that we think more. But besides that, we have the carnivores. Most of them that originated in North America, so bears and saber-toothed cats. And then both this megafauna originated, like some, especially like the giant sloths, the armadillos, originated in South America, and the carnivores and the horses originated and in the North America. And they were isolated for a long time during the whole Cenozoic, since like 65 million years ago after the dinosaur extinction. These continents were totally isolated. But then, due to the movement of the continents, the South and the North America were integrated, they were linked due to the Panama Isthmus. So the Central America just glued everything together due to tectonic activities. And because of that, this megafauna started to migrate. So megafauna from North America migrated to North America, and some animals from North America migrated to South America. That is what we call the Great Biotic Interchange event. So these animals were migrating, and because of that, we also have specific species of some native groups of the other continent that, given an example, we have sloths, like the giant ground sloths. They were originated in South America, and they could reach and they migrated into North America. And we have this species, this ground sloth that is called Paramylodon that only occurs in North America. This species does not occur in South America. So this is just interesting to think about of how the evolution of these animals happened in these continents, and that this megafauna, this group of giant sloths, giant armadillos, saber-toothed cats, bears, all of that survived through all the last glaciations, because we didn't have only one ice age, right? We have like several glacial and interglacial cycles. And this megafauna survival, sometimes they were in smaller populations, sometimes they were in refugees, types of environments, but they survive through the Quaternary, through the Pleistocene. Just the Pleistocene is from 2 million years ago, 2.5 million years ago, until the 10,000 years ago. So during 2 million years ago, and all the different environment change and climate change, these animals survived in the Americas. But only around 10,000 years ago, they were extincted. Like a lot of them were extinct, especially in South America. We lost a lot of biodiversity, and that's why we wonder why that happened and what kind of influence maybe humans have on that.
Yeah, let's put a pin on that, because we're going to come back to that point. I mean, what led to the extinction of all these animals back then. But so, I mean, the kind of picture you're painting there, if I understood it correctly, there were lots and lots of new animals that when Homo sapiens arrived at the Americas, they had never seen before. They had never interacted with before, correct?
Yes, definitely. Especially in South America. I think that maybe in North America too, but I think that they were used to like mastodon, mammoths, what they were reaching south. And then in South America, they started to find like very weird and especially herbivores, like very weird and new animals, but herbivores that was not like so much of dangers for them.
And so, did Homo sapiens start interact with these animals also around the time that they arrive in the Americas, or was it a little bit later? I mean, what do we know about it?
Great question. This is also what we are trying to understand. It makes sense that they were interacting right when they got, right? Because it's
Yeah.
resources. So it's resources. So we don't know yet the full picture of how they were interacting. Like, were they hunting these animals? Were they hunting all of these animals, or there was a preference for a specific kind of animals? We don't know that yet. It's all a lot of open questions, but yeah, it makes sense. We are finding evidence that humans were interacting with these animals, not necessarily hunting. Maybe they just found the animal dead, because it's hard to say, right, in the archaeological record if we hunt something unless we find like specific cut marks on specific parts of the body of the skeleton that shows that, yeah, we were hunting that. But sometimes we just find, okay, burned bones or some marks of interaction that could be scavenging behavior. So the animal was dead by other animal, or they died from some disease or whatever, and then humans found that animal dead and they interact. Okay, so let's eat that meat. Let's use their skin for something. So yeah, there's all a lot of open questions about how we interacted with these giant mammals, these giant with this megafauna.
Mhm. But then, at least from a certain point onward, there's evidence that we started hunting them.
Yeah, at least when we think about the Clovis culture, like when we think about for a long time we thought that Clovis were the first Americans, right? Because we found several of the specific stone tools that are very specific for hunting. So they have like this function for hunting, and several archaeological sites, Clovis sites, were found in association with megafauna, especially proboscideans like mastodons and mammoths. So we found these stone tools that are specific for hunting together with these animals, and sometimes also with marks. So this is like, okay, solid evidence that humans were hunting megafauna at least 13,000 years ago. So we know that humans were hunting megafauna around 13,000 years ago. But like I say, we don't know when humans got here first. So it's hard to say that they got here and they start hunting already, or they were like, okay, we don't have a lot of population yet. Let's be sure that we're safe before we try to interact with a giant sloth that is 6 meters tall. And then after the density of humans were higher, they were like this, and the climate was more favorable. They start hunting more. We still don't know this answer. So we know for sure that humans were hunting megafauna at least from 13,000 years ago. We have several evidence, especially for North and South America, like 12,000 years ago. But we don't know when that start happened together with, like, exactly your question, like we got here and we start to interact already. It makes sense that yes for me, but not necessarily hunting, because hunting is a little more risky than just wait for the animal be dead and you just go there and you get your meat and you get whatever you want. So I hope it's clear, like what I was trying to explain, that we don't know for sure when that happened, because again, we still discuss when humans got here and how we were interacting with megafauna.
Mhm. But since there were also some carnivores, what about the other way around? Is there any evidence that some of those carnivores might have hunted or have humans as prey or not?
That makes a lot of sense. I don't remember now any paper, maybe I just missed, but I don't remember any paper of people discussing like evidence for carnivore marks, right, on bite marks on human skeletons. I think also because it's really hard to find human skeletons, especially like really old human skeletons in the Americas. But I don't remember seeing any evidence for carnivores, for carnivore damage on human skeletons. Maybe there are, and I'm not sure. But it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, probably they were like being like a huge risk. Carnivores were a huge danger for humans. Maybe humans understood and knew how to handle that. But yeah, makes a lot of sense. They were like definitely dangers for humans.
And still in the domain of interactions, were any of these animals, or was it even possible to domesticate any of these animals?
I don't think so, because the domestication of animals happened like way later in the human history, human evolution history. So yeah, I don't think so, especially because they were very huge. Like I think it would be really hard for them to try to domesticate somehow. I think they were, especially because they were also hunter gatherers population. So they were not in one place for a long time. So they were there, they were eating, they were doing their tools, they were surviving, they were moving, they were moving, they were moving. So that makes like really hard for you to domesticate and spend time trying to domesticating an animal that you have to bring the giant sloth with you to another place. So I don't think that they even tried to do that back then.
Yeah, I don't think that would fulfill any of the criteria that we tend to have associated with species that we are able to domesticate. So,
Yeah.
and perhaps, I mean, some of the species that eventually later on were domesticated were not megafauna, and it probably occurred more or less around the time of the American Neolithic, right?
Yeah, it was like recent, more like history stuff, not prehistory. I don't
Yeah.
think, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I missed something, but I don't think that domestication happened in the prehistory, at least in the Americas for sure.
But I mean, through zooarchaeology, how can we identify traces of human interaction in extinct animal bones, for example? What do we look for?
So first we need to find traces. We need to find evidence that we need to find the animal bone, right? And then we look to this bone and we try to see if there's marks of human doing something with that bone. So for example, fractures. That's what I was talking about, the example of this really old and controversial site in California. Researchers found mastodon bones that are broken, and they found this. They did some experiments, they did a lot of research, and they came to the conclusion that that was human made, was human intentional breakage. But it's really complicated. It's not an easy task, because even like breaking some bone can be due to several causes. Maybe the animal fall, maybe the animal die and then some rock fall into that, or maybe humans, or maybe other animals. So this is one example, like breakage. So we try to understand the fracture partners and try to identify, especially through experiments, how similar it is, like the fracture that we find in the zooarchaeological context, to what we know that is human made or natural made. So this is one example. Another example is to find the marks of stone tools. So when humans are hunting, or they find the animal die and they are scavenging and they are using their stone tools to take out the meat, to clean the animal. So when you are doing all of that, you are marking with the stone tool the bone, and it makes like specific marks that are preserved. So when the fossil, so like when the bone turns to fossil, this mark is also preserved. But again, several factors can make like marks, like carnivore when they are biting, they have like specific marks of tooth. Rodents are, if the animal is exposed for a while, rodents can use the bones to sharpen their teeth. Trampling, so some animals can just trampling and walk around, and the sediments and the trampling can make like marks. So all of that is also makes also complicated. So we need to do a lot of research. We need to find protocols. We need to find new methods to be able to identify something confident as, okay, this is how a tooth mark looks like. This is how a stone tooth mark looks like. This is how sediments, grains looks like. And another possibility, burn bonds. So if we find in this archaeological context some black bonds or even white because it's calcified from burning bonds, we can, of course, with the whole context, it's even better if we have like evidence for fire structures, like fireplace around the site. But if somehow we find like some bonds that look like burn, that can be also an evidence that humans were burning the bonds. But not because it's just black, it's burned. Other natural reactions, natural agents can make some bond turn black, such as iron and manganese staining from the soil. So you need to, it's not just look, oh, this is black, this is burned, humans interacted with this animal. No, we need to find evidence that this is not iron or manganese staining for sure. This is the first thing. This is not a natural fire that happened for some reason. So this is like some of evidence that we look in the archaeological records. So marks from stone tools, breakage, partners, burning. Also, not just this, this is just like what we can see in the bond, but just like the association, if we find like bonds, like I was talking about the Clovis points, if you find like together with stone tools, is evidence that they were together, like they were buried in the same layer, so they were in association. So these are some of the evidence that we look for. But also it's very complicated. It's not just finding and saying, oh, this is evidence for human interaction with these animals. Let's publish that, because we have all these other possibilities. That's why it's very important to do a very meticulous study, especially in what we call taphonomy in archaeology and paleontology. That is the study of how after the death of the animal, what happened after that? Everything that happened from the animal death was like other animals pushed that animal to the other part, or like the ray moved the bones, like what happened until from the moment of death until like after the bury and thousands of years when we found that bone. So this is taphonomy. This is why is a very important study when we're trying to understand all these evidences.
That's all very fascinating. And actually, I was going to ask you, even before you answered my previous question, with the kinds of protocols, methods, and tools that we have at our disposal, I mean, the best ones, when we get a new bone with a particular mark on it, and we are trying to identify whether it was, for example, a mark from the tooth of another animal or done by a stone tool, for example. When we arrive at the conclusion, let's say that it was a stone tool, what is the degree of certainty that we have, even with the best methods and tools that we have at our disposal, that it was actually done by a stone tool? Because we can't be ever 100% sure, right?
That's right. I think that the only possible so far that I'm aware, like the only evidence that is like, okay, you cannot say that this is not human interaction, is like there's a specific skull, like Notchomastodon, like a proboscidean, extinct proboscidean from South America and Brazil. There's like this skull with like stone tool, like a lithic, like a stone tool engraved in the skull. So it's direct evidence. This is like the only thing that you can say. It was not a carnivore. It was not, it didn't fall. Like this is, but this is so rare. You cannot expect to find like the exact picture of human hunting, So this is like, I think maybe I'm wrong, but I think that is the only evidence that we have for the Americas of something like the picture of the moment, like somehow humans did that, the animal died, they left it there and it was preserved and great for us, amazing stuff. But most of this other stuff is always gonna fall into this subjective interpretation. So we try our best as scientists. So we try our best to do experiments and see, okay, I want to know how it looks like carnivore tooth marks. So I'm going to give my bone to a carnivore. They're going to do like their little teeth marks there. I'm going to see that on the microscope. I'm going to see, okay, they are square, they are little, they have like a little round edge, or they have like a sharp edge. I'm going to characterize how this mark looks like, make like a little protocol on that. And then when we find something on the archaeological site, I'm going to compare and see, okay, it fits, it looks like that. But it's really hard because maybe what is deep enough for me is not deep enough for you. So if I say, oh, this mark is deep enough to be human-made and not sediment abrasion, for you, it can be like, no, it does not convince me. So we still have lots of disagreements on that in science, which is healthy, I think, as long as researchers are ethical, like as long as they can disagree without disregard each other's work. So we can say like, this does not convince me, but I'm proposing you something. Like I say, Ricardo, I don't think that what you're saying that stone tool marks looks like stone tool marks, because I think that it looks more like rodent. So my suggestion is do some experiments with this specific rodent. That is what I think it is. So we can, and so this is contributing to science, I think. I think it's not useful if I just say, yeah, Ricardo, this is not. I don't think it is. It does not look like. So this is like really hard, and this is one of the problems that we face, I think, in science. And we are doing our best. Like I'm trying to do my best. I'm in a very early stage of my career, but in these early stages, what I'm trying to do is finding new approaches. Okay, so we try to characterize these marks under the microscope, and this specific powerful, let's say like this, instrument microscope that we call a scanning electron microscope, that makes us be able to see very deep, in a deeper resolution. So when we see on the microscope a mark like this, when we see on the scanning electron microscope is like the specific internal parts of my finger, like the texture of my skin. So this is what we use. Like this is like the traditional method to like, okay, we are seeing the texture of the marks, let's say like this. So we know the characteristics of the marks to differentiate from human-made or not human-made. But what we're trying to do is finding other possibilities. So let's try to see that in 3D. Let's try to see some using synchrotron facilities, that is like very powerful instruments that we have to be able to see like microtomography in a very high resolution and elemental composition. So we're trying to see different minerals on top of these marks. So yeah, just giving a brief overview is like we're trying to find new stuff and new methods to work on that.
No, and I really think that's really fascinating. I mean, there are some people that get a bit frustrated, and then there are perhaps a few people that try to dismiss some of this evidence because we don't have 100% certainty that it was really that, it was a stone tool or it was tooth marks or something like that. But for me, at least personally, it makes it even more fascinating and exciting that we don't have 100% certainty what it is, and over time we develop new methods, new tools, new technology to address those questions.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's get into megafauna extinction in the America, and of course we can tie it to megafauna extinction in other places around the world. So how did the megafauna in the Americas go extinct? And how do we address such a question?
I'm not sure you're asking when or how or the reasons.
How? How? I'm asking how.
The reasons you mean,
Sorry?
right? You mean the reasons, like the
Yeah.
causes?
Yes, the reasons, the causes, yes.
We still don't know. We still don't know. We're still trying to answer that. So the two main hypotheses is climate change
Yeah.
and human pressure, or a combination of both, which is
Okay.
actually the most, I think, strong hypothesis. So we think that humans, it makes sense to think about humans overhunting this megafauna until they disappear, but especially because that kind of happened in all the continents. Like I say, these mega mammals were living from million years and surviving climate changes from million years, thousands of years. And then when humans start to go through all these continents and migrate and increase in density, these animals were extinct, especially the density. I think density is the key because for a long time we thought, like we were talking about the human migration, humans were following animals. Okay, humans got from Siberia to North America following mammoths, overhunting them 13,000 years ago. They killed them all, and that's it. And I don't think it was so like straight like that, like linear like that, especially because like we are seeing new evidence showing we might be in the Americas way earlier than that. But maybe, especially because we were here around 20,000 years ago, we were interacting differently with these animals. We were being able to live with these animals, and also we were in lower density because the climate was not so good around 20,000 years ago, 15,000 years ago. And then when climate change, it was good for us too. And we started to increase in density and take more of the space and change the vegetation and compete for resources with the herbivores, not just hunting. It's not just like, oh my God, we kill from the overkill hypothesis, but we were a huge new competitor with these herbivores and with the carnivores. We changed the whole ecosystem. So after all of that, and after like this density, like this high density of humans for that we have around 10,000 years ago, we start to see the extinction of these animals around the Americas, in North and South America. So we have like this both hypothesis: climate change, human pressure, and but we still don't have significant. I don't say significant evidence, but we don't have a consensus in academia
Okay.
yet regarding
But
the reasons.
but in terms of the timing, I mean, not only in the Americas, but also over other places in the globe, like for example, Australia and Eurasia. I mean, there's a coincidence, or in terms of the period of it happening in the period after the arrival of humans there, right? I mean
Yes.
that it
Mhm.
follows our arrival across these different places.
Yeah, it happened in different times, the extinction. So
Yeah.
extinction
Hmm.
in Australia happened different in the Americas.
Yes.
But like you said, similar to when humans got to the Australia that we know for now, and when humans got to Eurasia, and when humans got to the Americas, is like in similar context in the time frame for that. But also, like I say, I love that it's always but, because some people might say, oh my God, they don't know what they're talking about. But it's just because science is always improving, and this is great. So for a long time, and we still think, of course, that megafauna was extinct around 10,000 years ago. But we are finding new evidence, even here in Brazil, that some megafauna survived later than that. So some researchers, they got a paper accepted now that is still not published, just got accepted. I'm looking forward to see that published, showing dates for megafauna in Brazil that survived until 3,000 years ago, which is crazy. And I think a lot of research is going to be like, what? Like, how is that possible? Something is wrong. Your dating techniques is not right. It's going to make a lot of noise, but if it's true, it's like so interesting to think about some specific parts of Brazil that this megafauna were able to survive. So I'm just saying that to show that if we find the new evidence, we need to think about the new model to explain what happened in the past. So if we find evidence that some megafauna survived until 3,000 years ago, 14,000 years ago, we will need to think about how to explain that. If we find evidence that humans were in the Americas 20, 30,000 years ago, we need to find new models to explain that. So definitely we have a new, different scenario regarding humans in the Americas and megafauna extinction and the interaction today than we had 10, especially 20 years ago. So researchers, like I say, thought about humans getting here, killing everything, and now we have a very different view of humans being here later, interacting in maybe a more suitable way, and then maybe with density and like higher density, they may have been affected megafauna in higher proportions.
But even if it took longer, I mean, if it was due to human activity or the density of human populations, it could have still been us humans the cause of the megafauna extinction, right? Or not?
It could be, yeah. Especially there's a new paper that was published, I think, in beginning of this year or the middle of this year, about a very important ecologist, like a very famous ecologist from Denmark, where he did like he and his co-authors did like this study comparing like lots of groups of megafauna and the timing of extinctions around the whole world, and they came to the conclusions that we were the main factor, like we were the key for the extinction of these animals, not climate change. So we're seeing like more and more studies, interesting, like good studies, especially from paleoecologists and ecologists, showing that we had a lot of influence on the megafauna extinction, way more than climate change in all the continents, especially because, like I say, like it's like different biomes in different timing and affecting a specific target of animals. Like we were affecting huge, like more than 40 kilos, especially like tons of kilos, like animals, land animals. We were not affecting that much the animals in the sea, in the like small or medium. So like all of that makes a very selective extinction that is not very well explained by climate change.
Okay, so if it was due to human activity that the megafauna extinction occurred, was it mostly because of hunting or also other sorts of human activity?
I believe that is all of that. It's hunting, is being a new competitor, so eating their fruits, eating their small animals too, so changing the environment and deforesting, like all of that, like I think it's not just the hunting. I think it's just like being a new pressure in the ecosystem in general.
Great. So let me just ask you one last question then. Would you like to tell us more before we go about what you're working on at the moment? And I mean, regarding the topics that we talked about today, what are perhaps some of the questions that we haven't answered yet that you would be more excited about?
There's so many questions. There's still, I think that is really interesting how we have open questions in general. I think that my main questions right now, what I'm more interested in searching and keep working on, is this understanding this interaction, understanding all of the questions that you made to me, and I was like, we don't know yet. So how they were interacting with these animals, how long we were interacting, like you say, like we got here and we start to hunting them already, and we start to interact them with them already. When we got here, how and why these animals were extinct, like this megafauna were extinct. And I'm definitely interested in the Americas, so I want to keep working with the Americas, especially South America, but like the whole Americas. So I want to understand how was the environment where these animals lived, how that changed, but yeah, especially like the interaction and finding the evidence for these interactions in South America, especially in South America, because we don't have a lot of people working with that here. So we have lots of bonds. So I'm saying, like, just in Brazil, we have lots of bonds, the whole South America, but just in Brazil, we have like so much potential. We find like so many megafauna bonds in caves, in rock shelters, in what we call tanks, that is like a specific geological setting here in Brazil. So we have so much, but researchers were paying attention only on taxonomy, so trying to understand the species. Okay, this is a species. No, let's review that and come to the conclusion that it's a new species. So just like taxonomy in general, paleoecology, which is great, and I love it also. So let's do isotopes. Let's see like do analysis on the teeth of these animals to understand what they were eating. And this is great, and this is amazing. But this is what they were doing. They were not looking to these bonds, trying to find evidence for human interaction. So were human interacting with these animals at all? So I think that this is the main question I have now, is understand, especially because a lot of researchers, especially in North America, say, oh, we don't have enough evidence. We have insufficient data for South America. So this is what I'm more interested in resolving. It is trying to find this evidence, even if it's to say, yes, we don't, like, not having evidence is also an evidence, like saying that we saw the bonds, we are looking for that, and we don't find evidence for human interaction until around 13,000 years ago, for example, is an example of a new result. But like what I was doing since my PhD, and I'm still working on, is this archaeological site called Santa Helena, that I was saying that is in central Brazil, in center of South America, where we have evidence for human occupation together with giant sloths around 27,000 years ago. So I accept the evidence of earlier human migrations in the Americas. So there's a lot of interesting questions to answer about that archaeological site. And because we know that we have that archaeological site and humans were there, I think that probably we have other evidence, other archaeological sites in the area, in the region, but we're not looking for them. So I think that there's a lot of evidence that is buried and we didn't find that yet. So I would like to keep working on answering evidence for humans being here and interacting with these animals before than we think.
Great, that all sounds very interesting. And if people are interested, where can they find your work on the internet?
I have a Twitter, X right now, that is Thaís Pansani. So sometimes I'm there, and I also have like my website where I publish the works that I'm doing, and if I have new publications, and also if I'm doing new interviews, or like where is I'm going to be next, if I'm what is my next appointment, if I'm in each country I am, because I'm not fixed. I still don't have like a permanent position. So I think like my website and Twitter are the best way to reach out to me and even ask questions if you want.
Great. I will be leaving links to that in the description of the interview. And Dr. Pansani, thank you so much again for taking the time to come on the show. It's been a very fun and entertaining interview. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Hi guys, thank you for watching this interview until the end. If you liked it, please share it, leave a like and hit the subscription button. This show is brought to you by Enlights, learning and development done differently. Check their website at enlights.com, and also please consider supporting the show on Patreon or PayPal. I would also like to give a huge thank you to my main patrons and PayPal supporters: Per Larsen, Jerry Mullerens, Frederick Sunda, Bernardo Seixas, Olaf Alex, Adam Kessel, Matthew Whittingford, Arno Wolf, Tim Hollis, Eric Alenia, John Connors, Philip Forrest Connolly, Dan Demetri, Robert Windiger, Rui Inácio, Zup, Marco Neves, Colin Holbrook, Phil Kavanagh, Michael Stormir, Samuel André, Francis Ford, Tiago Nunes, Fergal Cossen, Hal Herzog, Nuno Machado, Jonathan Labyrinth, João Linhares, Stantantia, Samuel Correia, Eric Hines, Mark Smith, João Eira, Tom Hummel, Sardas France, David Sloan Wilson, Yacila Dez Araújo, Romain Roach, Diego Londonho Correia, Yannick Punter, Dana Rusmani, Charlotte Bliss, Nicole Barbaro, Adam Hunt, Pavlo Stasevski, Nelek Bach, Guy Madison, Gary G. Alman, Sam Afzal, Adrian Yeager, Paul Tolentino, João Barbosa, Julian Price, Edward Hall, Edin Bronner, Douglas Fry, Franca Bortolotti, Gabriel Ponce Cortez, Ursula Litsky, Scott, Zachary Fish, Tim Duffy, Sonny Smith, John Wiseman, Daniel Friedman, William Buckner, Paul George Arnaud, Luke Loaki, Georgios Theophanes, Chris Williamson, Peter Wolozin, David Williams, Diogo Costa, Anton Erickson, Charles Murray, Alex Shaw, Maury Martinez, Coralie Chevalier, Bangalore Atheists, Larry Dealey Jr., Old Erringbon, Sterry, Michael Bailey, Dan Sperber, Robert Grassi, Igor N., Jeff McMahon, Jake Zool, Barnabas Radix, Mark Campbell, Thomas Dovner, Luke Nissen, Chris Story, Kimberly Johnson, Benjamin Galbert, Jessica Nowicki, Linda Brandon, Nicholas Carlson, Ismail Benzliman, George Coriatis, Valentin Steinman, Per Crowley, Kate Van Goller, Alexander Hubbard, Liam Dunaway, BR, Masood Ali Mohammadi, Perpendicular, Jonas Hertner, Ursula Goodenough, Gregory Hastings, David Pinsoff, Sean Nelson, Mike Lavigne, and Dios Necht. A special thanks to my producers: Isar Webb, Jim Frank, Lucas Stafiniak, Tom Vanagdam, Bernard Ugni, Curtis Dixon, Benedict Mueller, Thomas Trumbull, Catherine and Patrick Tobin, John Carlo Montenegro, Alnick Ortiz, and Nick Golden, and to my executive producers Matthew Lavender, Sergio Quadriano, Bogdan Kanivets, and Rosie. Thank you for all.